Watch the Atheist Experience live, Sundays at 4:30 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTAXP and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callaxp.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host tonight, Objectively Dan, and this is the live call-in show where we talk to you guys every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time, about what you believe and why. And joining me every week is a special guest. This week is no different. It's Christy Powell. Hey, Christy.
Howdy. Thanks so much for having me back. It's been too long.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Christy is another host here at the Atheist Community of Austin. At our, I would consider Secular Sexuality a sister show to Truth Wanted because we premiered the same month. Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like getting started, there was that explosion of new shows. Nobody knew what was going on. Everybody was incredibly excited. And I think you and I are the two like applied shows in a way. Like it's not just the philosophical debates. It's not just the navel gazing. It's the like, why do you believe these things? And how is that like impacting your life? And what can we be doing about that?
Right. I would also argue that we get the wackiest calls.
Yeah, that is for sure. If you're a call screener on AXP, like you may have to deal with some yelling, you may have to deal with some wildness, but you know, on our shows, it maybe gets a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole.
we definitely go down in some holes. Some of them involve rabbits, others involve other things. I can make that joke tonight, folks, because we have Christy on with us. So Christy, again, welcome back to the show. I'm really happy that you're back on. It's been, like you said, too long. So if you have questions for myself, or if you have questions to Christy, if it's LGBT related, if it's sex related, anything like that's the stuff we can talk about tonight. Plus, whatever other stuff we usually talk about on this show. But one thing I wanted to start the show off with, Christy, was something we were talking a little bit about before the show started, which was hypnotherapy, right?
Yeah. Well, hypnotherapy and just all of the myths that go with it, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, any good therapist will tell you that hypnosis is like one of the oldest forms of therapy, and it's not necessarily considered like a therapy unto itself, but it is a incredibly effective strategy in therapy. While at the same time, you have like crazy YouTube videos of people swearing that if you just stare at this spiral for a couple of minutes, your dick will get longer, or your like love of your life will be manifested, or all of these like crazy extrapolations from that like central idea. Yeah.
So when I grew up, the hypnosis stuff was always just like you put a watch in front of somebody and wave it back and forth, and then you can
like a chicken,
command them to do whatever you want, right? Which is interesting. But I had never experienced real, like quote unquote, real hypnotherapy until actually, surprisingly enough, when I used to work at a Christian camp. There was this guy, another counselor at this camp, who outside of camp was a truck driver. So I don't know how he picked up these hypnotherapy skills. I think he said he went to some classes. Anyway, he tried to do this hypnosis stuff on these other counselors one night when we were out camping on our weekend retreat. And they were kind of out of it. They had their eyes closed and they were like acting weird. I still don't know. I don't know if they were acting, if there was all just one big bit, or if they were like lulled into some sort of other state, See, I don't know.
That's the thing, is it's both. Like when we're talking about like performance hypnosis, like is somebody just acting, or are they being like hypnotized into doing it? And the answer is both, because
kind of both,
hypnosis
right?
is a choice. Like it's
Sure.
a way of perhaps relaxing you or focusing you on a
Yeah.
certain thing,
Yeah.
but ultimately you're still there. You're
Right.
still doing the thing,
It's kind of like it's like speaking in tongues, right? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, there may not be like an actual spirit like incorporating somebody's body, but
But
like
there's
that
like flow state to it. Like they're
there's
in
a
it.
performance going on. Yeah, like you're definitely in a. From what I've heard from people, right? There's a mental state that goes on, and I understand. Like as a Christian who used to like do group prayer and stuff, right? Like I feel something in that moment, and I can recognize there's those feelings are real without recognizing like the supernatural, right? Like there's definitely a distinction. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, hypnosis is not magic. I'm not trying to make any wild claims about what hypnosis can do, but it is a like meaningful tool and an important phenomena. And it wasn't until I started to study it that I felt really comfortable moving from like unpracticing, like distancing himself kind of Christian to like kind of angry atheist activist, because understanding those techniques and that process and recognizing some of the ways I'd been influenced and that those experiences were not sincere, that I had like a better way of explaining them. That totally moved me from, well, I don't think the God of the Bible is correct, to, oh fuck, now I see what they did.
Right. Yeah. So what is like, you know, what is it really, right? Like when people say they're hypnotherapists, what are they talking about?
Yeah, well, I mean, hypnosis is really just the study, the manipulation, the perhaps like exercises surrounding focus. That's all it is. It completely comes down to focus. If you are watching a watch swing back and forth or whatever else you're doing, what you are doing is giving yourself permission to not be distracted by outside influences or senses or outside thoughts. And it can empower you to perhaps let your guard down, to perhaps let down some of your resistance. Now, that doesn't mean that like you have no defenses and a hypnotherapist can just like reach into your brain and pluck things out. It just means that you're not maybe resisting the conversation or resisting the ideas being presented in the ways that you might otherwise.
So it's almost like it's like an induced meditation session.
Absolutely. I mean, the distinction between like mindfulness or meditation and hypnosis is very thin. One of my favorite researchers or writers on hypnotism is Michael Yapko, who is kind of like wrote the book. Like his book Trance Work is probably the #1 textbook on introductory hypnotherapy. And he has a book comparing like mindfulness and meditation with hypnosis side by side. And you recognize it really is a lot of the same techniques and ideas, just with a slightly different tradition behind it, maybe slightly different verbiage, but they're kind of the same notion.
Yeah. You can see how when you're talking about something like this, you can get into new age territory very, very fast, right? Like when I think about like the hypno stuff I've seen, it's like the YouTube video, like nowadays, right? We're talk about first when I was a kid, it was like, you know, the watch thing, right? Nowadays, there is a whole market on YouTube of like videos that you can watch of supposed to get you into certain states or like frequencies you can allegedly listen to that will change your body in different ways, and a porn genre as well, which we want to talk about.
No, we were talking about that on the show last night. There is all of this porn that can allegedly like force you into becoming addicted through the power of hypnosis. And I think it's fascinating to ask, like, why does this exist? Like, there's obviously some desire to feel like your relationship with porn is out of your control. Like, I can't help it. I've been hypnotized. I must obey. And I mean, that goes a long way towards justifying your decision to spend the day watching porn, which I don't know that you should need to justify. I mean, you know, if you've got other responsibilities, like, fair. You know, if I were to spend the whole day watching football when I told my partner I was going to clean the house, it'd be nice to be able to say, well, I had no choice but to watch football. Like I was hypnotized into doing it.
Hypnotized. John Madden lulled me into watching the sport.
Yeah, exactly. And so I get the temptation there, but you're right. Like we've gotten a very long ways away from what hypnosis can actually do when we're convincing ourselves that a bunch of like binaural beats or some of this other stuff can create like an addiction relationship with a video. Like that's just not how any of this works.
Yeah, I'm wondering just how many bogus therapy places in the city of Austin alone like use hypnotherapy. At least when I say bogus, right? What I mean is like make claims that it can do things that it can't actually do.
Sure.
Right? Because yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you what, in the realm of psychology, and I'm one of the first people to come out and say that I love what I do. I'm very proud of the education that I got in order to get here. But I will clearly say that I know so many terrible therapists.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Therapy is a burgeoning field that is full of charlatans, full of bullshit.
Yeah.
But honestly, most therapists are kind of terrified of hypnosis just because it does have such a bad rap within the general population.
Yeah.
They'd be much more willing to sell you some sort of pseudoscience like enneagrams or any number of other dumb things.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, listen, I'm partial to the Enneagram. I like only because there's we haven't talked about this too much on this show, but like there is a very weird Venn diagram between Enneagram and progressive Christianity.
Oh, I know. That's what makes it so interesting to me is the way the church has globbed onto it.
How weird is that, right? I think it's because there's these claims about the Enneagram being rooted in Jewish mysticism. Have you heard about this?
Yeah. It's like vaguely Kabbalic. And I mean, I guess you can tie it back to Jung, and Jung is like the Rasputin of psychology. We love to tell made up stories about his magical powers.
True? Yeah, but like from what I understand, there's like no evidence of the Enneagram like before like the 20th century or something. I don't know. It's very bizarre.
No, it's totally based on Jungian archetypes and like loosely based well after the fact.
Yeah. Very strange stuff. But yeah, there is, this is something important to talk about though, because like there's going to be breakthroughs in science, in the science of mental health, in the science of psychology that are going to probably be strange, and they're going to be like something that we may resist at first,
sure.
Right? Like, we'll talk about like SSRIs, for example, right? Like a lot of people still today are very against SSRIs, what they can do. There's still a lot of stuff that we don't know about it, but this idea that this drug that can alter your mood that you just take, like that's if you tell that to a medieval peasant, I don't know, that's kind of crazy, right? Like you can just kind of get that from your doctor. So what are some tools that you've personally figured out, Christy, between figuring out what's real and what isn't, especially in like burgeoning fields like the ones that you work in?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. Like, you can't know what will eventually become validated.
Yeah.
I guess if we're going to put this out on the internet, I'll go ahead and call my shot. I am not telling the world that somatic experiencing and that type of like shivering and shaking somatic healing or shamanic healing is real.
Okay.
I am going to say that 10 years from now, I think maybe it really will turn out to have been real.
Okay.
So not endorsing it now, not putting my name on it. I think the research is too weak and isn't there yet, but I'm super fascinated by what we've seen early on.
Okay.
I'm also super curious about the research we're doing with psychedelics and the early returns there.
Sure.
We're not there yet, not making any big claims, but I think that 10 years from now, things like magic mushrooms in the therapy office are going to be much more common.
Interesting. Okay. So really it's just kind of like whenever other people say it is, right? Like, I don't know. That's kind of how it is, right? Because it's like, I'm not doing any original research, right? Any quote unquote research I'm doing is most of the time it's a web search, maybe a book if I've got time, but even one person's book, I mean, that's not enough to say whether something is definitively true or not in a lot of scientific fields. I mean, so yeah, I guess it's kind of like, well, I mean, people are looking for new ways to kind of help themselves in different ways, and people are going to try some of this experimental stuff. I mean, do you have hard limits when it comes to this stuff, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a huge difference between my curiosity and like what I would ever actually sit down and do with a client.
Yeah.
And I'll definitely kind of borrow things from burgeoning or developing fields that I can work into like an already existing framework while being, kind of mindful not to extend it beyond that. But you're right. Like that word research, I think is really tricky because, for instance, I have recently been seeking certification and like gaining more education in a particular form of mindfulness.
Yeah.
And I spent hours and hours and hours reading books about it, going to trainings about it, but then also trying to like red team it, going online and what are the criticisms of this particular belief system or this particular strategy? What's the counter research say? What is the research that we have on it say? And I'm skimming, abstracts of different papers. I'm getting into some papers a little bit to kind of see the validity of some of these like meta-analysis, but that's not research that I'm generating. I'm just reading somebody else's homework and trusting that they've done a good job, but also verifying to what I feel is sufficient, which hopefully is rigorous, but I'm a clinician, not a scientist.
Yeah, I think this touches on one of the biggest problems, in my opinion, of the 21st century. I think that we found ourselves, right? The veracity of information that we find, right? Like I can say for myself, I didn't really know how to read news, like read a news article and truly digest it until I took media studies courses in college, right? Like it was only after that when I even had just a modicum of understanding of how that industry even works. And even then, I can only say that I'm a real lay person, right? Like I don't work in journalism. I don't work in news. I don't have a complete picture that somebody does. And imagine people who have even less education than that, right? Who are now coming to the internet and are finding all of these crazy new things that are going around. I mean, like this is like the big issue of our times, isn't it? Just figuring out what's real and what isn't. How do we get good methods to figure out if this new practice is legit or if this is just another way for people to make money off of people who are struggling? Like, I don't know. It's some crazy times we're living in, huh?
Oh, no question. And I think it all comes down to humility. That willingness to acknowledge what we don't know and what we aren't experts in. Just because an expert says it's true doesn't mean it is true, but it goes a hell of a lot further towards providing evidence than you just babbling about what you read on the toilet. And that distinction is, man, it's shown up in this country in the last 5 years, no question.
It really has. It really has. Well, folks, we're open to being wrong about things that we believe. I would say so. At least I am. I think Christy is. I think Christy is. And we would love to talk to you. So if you guys want to talk to us, challenge what we believe, or maybe you have a belief that you want to talk to us about, please come call into the show. At the number below, it's 512-991-9242, and we'd love to come talk to you. So I think we should talk to some people right now, Christy.
Let's do it.
Okay, cool. Before we get to talking to some people, I have to thank our patron of the week, because every single week I always give a shout out to one of our patrons who donate on tiny.cc/PatreonTW. So thank you to everybody who donates on Patreon, but we want to give a particular shout out this week. And this week's shout out is Paul Sherman. Thank you, Paul Sherman. You are the patron of the week. And thanks again to everybody that donates on that Patreon. You guys rock, and you help make this show happen. Thanks again, everybody. And with our patron of the week out of the way, I think we should talk to some callers. Here's somebody who wants to talk to us. This is Andrew calling in from Maine. Mm-hmm. Andrew, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hi. I just wanted to make the point. You already read it, but that everybody, whether or not they know it or believe it, is really religious and they worship something. Even atheists. I mean, and some people, I would say, or atheists, I'd say that's logic, and they also presuppose logic, and so that doesn't make their worship special or better than anyone else's.
Can I ask you what you mean by worship?
I was going to say, let's start by just defining that term if we can.
Yeah. Basically, it's the ultimate thing in their life, and that would be the most simple way I could define it.
So
Okay.
if we take that though, what you're saying is that literally every person has a number one thing, right? Like it's just a ranking
Yeah.
system. If the thing you worship is just the thing that is biggest in your life, then doesn't everybody have something that is the biggest and then maybe something that's slightly smaller and slightly smaller?
Yeah, that's what I mean, yes, and that's the point I'm making. And
That's truth by definition. Sure.
yeah.
I guess if you want to define it that way.
I want to define it. Yeah, so I mean, but that also, religion is worship, and so that makes people religious about different things. It could be a million different topics, but everybody's religious whether or not they admit it or they know it. Or I just wanted to make that point.
Well, you went from everybody worships to everybody's religious.
Right.
Dan, let me give that to you.
Sure, for sure. No, I mean, I was just gonna say the same thing, right? Like, if I feel like criticisms like this, Andrew, are trying to make some statement to say as, well, you're just as bad as these people, so why are you criticizing them, right? Like that's kind of like the gist of arguments like these, and it's like, well, look, people who are religious are people, right? And people are going to do people stuff. I get it. We all have hierarchies in our lives. We all find things that are more valuable than other people. The reason why shows like this one exist and why communities like ours exist is because people who have religious beliefs, certain religious beliefs, are causing harm with those beliefs to other people. And we would like to speak out against that and say, hey, we want to point out that the reason why you're doing this, the foundation for your action, is either illogical or irrational or ahistorical or whatever, because that should stop the grounds by which people should be acting, right? We want to live in a world where people believe in true things and act on true premises. And if they act on those premises, then they should realize that their particular beliefs don't lead them down the right path, don't lead them down a path of truth. So obviously that's my prerogative, right? Not everybody feels that way, but that's the reason why we talk about this stuff. Yeah, if you want to talk about, everybody has something in their lives, sure, but that doesn't mean that, oh, my beliefs are the same as somebody who believes in Yahweh. Our worldviews are totally different in that respect.
Yes, they are. But you mentioned they're different. They're still religious in a sense, but you mentioned wanting to know and believe and live what's true, and there's really no way you can. In the end, that's a belief. I mean, there's no way you can know that for sure. So I just want to put that out too.
Of course,
it's
an
aspiration, not a destination. We don't ever achieve truth. We strive towards it.
Right. Yeah, I'm not going to disprove hard solipsism.
It's one subjective person's opinion, versus another subjective. Well,
it's all subjective. Everything that you're processing, everything that you're hearing right now as you listen to my voice is being distorted by the technology that we're using. It's being distorted by the imperfections in your eardrums. It's being distorted in the translation of your nervous system, which is going to be impacted by what you had to eat and how anxious you are and what's going on in your life. It's all subjective. It doesn't mean we just give up and say we don't care. Everything that we experience as well as we can. And when we experience something that we know isn't true, like, for instance, somebody raising from the dead or somebody being the literal and perfect word of God, even though it's self-contradictory, we notice that, we point that out, and we look for something that seems a little bit closer to truth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this kind of gets to the other thing I mentioned is every time you think about anything, you're obeying the laws of logic, and you can't validate the laws of logic using the laws of logic. So you presuppose that as well. Anytime you make an absolute statement like that, I'm critical of that, I guess.
I don't know if I made any absolute statements, but I don't know. This is the third swing and a miss. Dan, how many more shots is fair here?
I get it. It's we can talk about paradoxes and logic, right? Paradoxes in our epistemic foundations. Okay, we're not here saying that we know everything and that we're going to tell everybody what to do and how we think we should do it. It's more so that we are pointing out other people's ways of doing things and reasonings are not only wrong in some sort of truth sense, right? Because that's important, but it's not everything. It's also harmful. Like, that's the biggest reason why I'm here, and why I have a microphone in front of me, and why I'm talking to you, Andrew. Because if religious belief didn't cause harm to other people, I honestly wouldn't care. If it was a total neutral, why would I even bother? But it's not a total neutral. It does have effects that you can measure and that you can look at and we can talk about.
So if you're so passionate about that, do you find it horrific about like how, for instance, Middle Eastern religions treat women?
Yes. If you want me to say Islam is bad, yes, it's bad. It's not a good religion. Okay.
I'm just wondering if you thought that, but yes,
of course.
The broader point was you. I mean, you're in a religious group practicing your secular religion, and other people are in their religions. And I don't know,
Andrew,
it's all kind of silly.
If that makes you feel better, if that puts you on your high horse and say, well, you're just like the rest of us, then yeah, okay, sure. I'm part of a group that talks about things. I mean, that's such a basic definition of religion and of worship. It's not meaningful to me. Okay, if you really think this is the same thing as somebody who's preaching on the street saying how gay people are going to go to hell, then by all means you're allowed to think that. I think most people would say that what I'm doing is pretty different. And if you're going to be charitable to that, I think you'd see that.
You're both preachers. I mean, you just have different opinions. That's the only difference.
Sure, and words can just mean whatever we want them to mean if we stretch them far enough. Like, Andrew, it's not that you're existentially completely wrong, but you're missing the whole point of all of the words that you're using. Go back and take words like religious and worship and these different things, run them through a dictionary and try to see how the conversation that we're having is like only in the vaguest, most tangential sense connected to it.
Yeah, for sure.
I actually did. I made sure I looked up worship before this, and there are definitions that don't include God or deity or something like that. So I
mean, neat, but I don't really care. Like, these words are meant to communicate and express ideas. I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, but when the words that you're using don't mean to the people you're talking to what you want to twist them into meaning, their value evaporates.
Yeah, and everybody's going to evaluate them differently. I mean, I think just because someone has a platform doesn't necessarily make it, more valuable than someone else's words.
Yes, and the fact that you called the show means that your opinion is just as valid, and somebody who sits on the toilet and reads a little bit on what they see on Facebook is just as qualified to have an opinion as somebody who does research science, I guess, but not in any way that means anything, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm interested in affecting policy, Andrew, right? Like, we can all live in our own worlds and our own bubbles and think what we want. But at the end of the day, I live in a society. I live with other people, right? And if I want to continue living in the way that I want to see fit, what's democratic is to have my voice out there and telling people what I personally think about things. And not just that, but why I think about the things that I do. And I will use reason. I will use logic to convince other people of that, because that's what convinces people. That is a convincing thing. And it's something, it's more reliable than something like a religious experience or, any other kind of, unjust, reasoning there.
That's a subjective opinion. And I know there's probably millions of people who would disagree with you. And so really your
opinion was too subjective.
What?
It's an opinion, Andrew. I mean, what do you want me to say? You want me to say, yes, this is absolute fact? Like, it's not.
I'm just trying to elucidate the fact that you're a guy who just admitted he's just pushing his agenda, and there are tons of other people like that. And that's, that doesn't make you
literally everybody is pushing an agenda. That's how people work. Like, scientists
activism is.
Yeah. Like, look, what's, what are we doing? What are we trying to say here? Are you saying? I think what you're trying to say is I'm just as bad as X or just as bad as Y. But look, you can look at why I'm doing the things that I do, and you can see that they're concretely different from what other people are doing. Right? I'm not motivated by bigotry. I'm not motivated by hatred for anybody. I'm not motivated by any. At least I don't want to be motivated by reasoning that could be considered specious. I want to be as truthful and as honest and as logical as I can when coming out here. And that's my personal agenda, of course. Like that's just how people are. I don't know.
I mean, I don't think, you implied, or you seem to imply religious people are motivated by bigotry. I don't think that's always the case. But yeah, everybody has.
No, it's not always the case. It's not always the case, but you have to admit that religion and religious motivations have been motivated by bigotry in the past. And that's not to say secular people haven't either, right? You want to talk about the history of anthropology? Anthropology started as a racist science. I mean, it really did, people, very secular people who had very warped understandings of how human beings work. Okay. People are just people. People have, bad ideas. We just want to point out the bad ones. Kind of want,
and this whole thing kind of makes me want to ask about your morality, but I know that's not what I called about. But because you're talking about good and bad, and
it's complicated.
And what you're.
I'm not going to say that it's easy. It's complicated. Morality is a complicated subject, and I understand how somebody who might, hear what we have to say and think, well, what are our grounds for reasoning? What are our grounds for doing right and wrong if we think that everybody just has an opinion? And again, I cite this idea of this principle of harm. Like, we can recognize harm. Harm isn't necessarily subjective. Harm is something that we can look at as individuals and measure to some degree. And so that's how myself and other atheists look at morality, but other atheists think of it differently. They use different parameters.
And ultimately, that's why it matters, Andrew, because you're trying to equate all of these things and say that they're the same. And maybe on some terribly fundamental level, they're the same in that everybody has an opinion. Everybody's opinion is subjective. Everybody has a thing that they think is most important. So we're all the same.
Yeah.
But why it matters is because we're trying to use the best tools available to avoid harm. That matters.
Okay, well, harm is subjective, and the best tools available. I mean,
everything is.
Everybody. Thank you. Thank you for admitting
harm is literally it has to be subjective, right? Because a person has to feel a thing, right? Yeah. But when I say you can measure harm objectively, what I mean is I can see Christy is harmed, or Christy's rights might be restricted if a certain law comes into practice, right?
The number of people who lose access to X, or the number of people who suffer death from Y. There are numbers involved.
Yeah, that's qualitative. That's quantitative. You can look at stuff.
Okay,
like
that. Yes. Yeah. But there are cases. I mean, I agree with the fact that death and killing people is bad. But there are cases in controversial topics.
We're talking about that.
I don't know if I should. But I'm saying there are examples where some person might consider something harmful and another person might not. And I know of at least one off the top of my head. I don't know any to say right now, but I mean,
there are plenty of examples where somebody believes X and somebody else believes Y. We could do that all night. Okay. I'm not sure the value here.
Let's do an easy one here, Andrew. Okay, gay marriage. Okay, gay marriage. There are people that think that two men getting married to each other is somehow causing harm. I'm not one of those people. I think it's not going to cause harm. There's some people that do think it caused harm. Why do they think it caused harm? Because for reasons that I think are specious. And I will talk until I'm blue in the face, until I try to convince someone that their reasoning is not good because I care about those people and I want them to have rights and I want them to be able to live in the same way, in the same world that I live, and have the same rights and privileges that I do. So that's my motive, Andrew.
Yeah, I understand. I'm not saying you're a bad person. I don't think you are, but let me give an example. Some people think that it's beneficial to allow kids to transition their gender, and some people think that's harmful. And I think, and that's a controversial topic. So, I mean, just to say we're reducing harm, it makes you God, and you can't just decide what is harmful for everyone and what is not. So,
I don't think Dan is trying to decide for everybody, but he and I and this organization and this community want to have meaningful discussions about which ideas are better. Yep. And the idea that you're presenting, like there are good people on both sides, is asinine, because we have a entire preponderance of science on one side and a couple of ignorant bigots on the other side. And if you feel like I am strawmanning your argument, I'm sorry, but this is big enough and it's been discussed enough for us to be way beyond this point of, well, you have your opinion and I have mine. We have so much data on this, and you can say it's all subjective, but what is the point of anything if we can't make wise-minded choices, knowing full goddamn well we're never going to get it perfectly right, but we can sure as hell do a lot better than we're doing on that specific example and plenty of others.
Right. I mean, like, if you have a problem with people coercing you to do certain things, then maybe, I don't know, you should talk to some of my anarchist listeners that have problems with the state, right? Like, if you don't want the state to do stuff, that's one thing. But like, as a person living in a democratic society, right, like, I'm going to talk about these things and I'm going to have an opinion and I'm going to have reasons for it. And if you want to talk about the harm of I'm talking about the kids transitioning. Yeah, there is a reason to believe that we should be able to have that option. If that kid is suffering and we want to reduce harm, and if we find that transitioning reduces harm the most, then that's what we should go with as a society. If we find that it doesn't, then we shouldn't. But we're still making a decision based on harm, right? And like you can't avoid that when having these discussions.
Is based on a mental state that changes, especially in children. So, and saying the science is one-sided on that is totally wrong. That's just totally
Andrew, you're
wrong.
just incorrect. We've been having this conversation for long enough for me to start to lose my patience, particularly when we're using this as our example, because there are real human people behind this philosophical debate. And I'm just not interested. I have documented on so many ACA shows. There is so much availability of this information. Go and find it. I don't need to walk the audience through it for the 10th time in the last handful of months. It is ridiculous to claim otherwise. We know that transitioning or allowing access to social transition and other items saves lives, that it prevents suicide, that it increases grades, that it increases this, that, and the other thing. And I'm sorry, but I'm just out of patience for you tonight, Andrew.
Yeah, okay. I was talking about, I agree there is some evidence for that in older people. I was talking more about children, but we can agree to disagree.
Yeah, we have data on that. I don't want to agree to disagree. I don't want to nice people on both sides of this, Andrew.
Yep.
Look it up. I've made it available. This organization has made it available. Plenty of other organizations have put that data out, and I'm just not interested.
I think you're pushing an agenda there that's harmful to children in some cases.
I'm pushing an agenda for damn sure, and it's that trans kids have rights.
Yeah, but they don't. Okay, we don't. I'm not gonna. There are other examples we can use. I mean, you know, the military sometimes thinks it's in the best interest of America to bomb foreign countries, and I would assume those people don't believe that. So, it's not as simple as just no harm.
Who doesn't believe that? What are we talking about? Why are you assuming our opinions on foreign policy right now, Andrew? What the hell? What do you think I believe on that?
Where did this come from? Everyone worships.
What possible indication do you have where I would either agree or disagree with you on that subject?
No, I'm not talking about your opinion. I'm saying that harm is...
Why are we talking about this?
Because harm is subjective. That's what I'm saying. And that
you can make... okay, so I see what you're getting at, right? There are people who make arguments for foreign policy that say we have to do this to prevent harm. There's some people that say we shouldn't do this because that causes harm. Okay, yeah. On that level, yes, it is subjective. Do you know what people who end up arguing for one position or the other do? They look at the evidence. They look at history. They look at policy decisions, a precedent. You can still use methods to convince people of one thing or the other. This isn't just a free for all, right? Like there's still precedent you can look at for this.
at the end of the day, I mean, especially from the way you're getting at it, it's just a political viewpoint one way or another. So it sounds like this is more of a politics.
Yes, a political viewpoint is a political viewpoint.
It's politics. What is novel about this? I don't understand.
What is your definition of reality at this point? I mean, rein it in a little bit. Like, we're here to try and make the world a better place, not a perfect place. They're like, existentially, we cannot do that.
I didn't know that this show admitted it was a political show. Isn't it from the ACA, and that's nonprofit? And you can't be
We're activists. We're not taking a particular party or politician as ours, but we are working to change the conversation and promote the separation of religion and government. It's right there in the mission statement, man.
That's our main focus. And sometimes we talk about aliens too. Like, that's kind of the whole thing.
So how does preaching and trying to impose your political viewpoints promote the separate, like, aside from that topic?
Okay. Now we're worshiping, we're religious, and we're preaching. I don't know.
You're political.
Andrew, we're not Andrew. I don't work for the state. I don't impose anything on anybody. Okay, this is a YouTube channel in a podcast. Okay, podcasts and YouTube videos have opinions. Like, that's just the fact.
They're mostly subjective opinions.
Yeah, it's just the show. Like, shows have opinions, and people give their opinions. I don't know. I don't know where we're going with this, Andrew. I'll be honest with you. I feel like you're disappointed by the fact that, yes, I'm a subjective person with opinions, and yeah, we all are. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not neutral. I'm not going to say, well, I can't participate in the political discussion because that would be politics, or I would have that would be a political thing. Of course it is. Talking about politics and having a position is politics. I mean, I don't know. This is redundant.
I mean, I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be a political show from what I understand. So, I mean, you might want to talk to
I think we've answered your question so much.
Andrew, I got to let you go, man. But look, we're apolitical in the sense that, look, like, there's certain legal things, right? Like, as a nonprofit, we don't endorse candidates or anything, right? Like, we do that. But, like, of course we have opinions on other stuff. And, like, when it comes to religion, which is like the, sort of the running theme between all of our shows, right? Like, religion inherently is political. It just is. Like, institutionally, you almost can't separate the two, right? Even in the most secular nations on earth, you will find that the theory of law that's been crafted for these countries is oftentimes based on religious thinking or religious institutions influencing this, right? So, yeah, we have political opinions. I just don't know what the point. Like, why is that bad? Is it bad because, what, are we not supposed to have opinions on things? I don't know. What was the point? I don't know. Christy, anything?
I mean, hard to say. I think after a while of doing too many backflips, I think he just lost his footing. Yeah, it'll happen.
We're not a news program. At least this show isn't, right? Okay, so if I was a journalist, right, and I was publishing a story, yeah, I should not have my own. I should try to remove my own political bias as much as possible in the reporting of that, right?
You can remove your bias, or at least work to remove your bias. But if you're covering a political issue, I mean, that's politics. Like, you're participating in politics. You're shaping politics.
Exactly. Yes. And of course, like, even then, I would argue, like, what you choose to report on is political in and of itself anyway.
The fact that you chose to write a story about it suggests that you think it's important. And if that's going to factor into how people vote, how people spend, I mean, it's all political. Yeah.
But anyway, I'm not my point in saying that is, I'm not a journalist. I am a podcast host. So, I kind of have free reign to talk about, First Amendment and all that stuff. Right. So whatever. But hey, sorry to disappoint you, Andrew. Sorry that I do have an agenda, obviously. Like, I wouldn't be here if I didn't. So you can either agree with my agenda, listen to my points, and see if you're on board, or you can disagree and move on and do what you do. So anyway, we have other callers here who want to talk to us. We want to talk to, this is perfect. This is a great topic. We're going to talk to Dale, calling in from Washington. I say it's perfect because we were literally just talking about this before the show. and a little actually during the show at the beginning. So let's talk to Dale from Washington. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Doing well. So I see that you want to talk to us about how sex could be an addiction.
Yeah. Don't you think any action could be you can acquire into an addiction?
Yeah, I don't. And I want to just acknowledge right out front that there are certainly good quality therapists that do. But I reject that idea, and for a number of reasons. One of the most important ones is that when we use that word addiction, we have to remember that we are taking a clinical term and then extrapolating it out into broader society and into a lexicon that is a little bit more fluid. And I appreciate that. Like, I have gone on record on secular sexuality and other shows saying over and over that words mean whatever people say that they mean, and that nobody gets to be sort of the arbiter of what addiction means. However, I think it's really important when we take a scientific or clinical term and we bring it out into the vernacular that we honor and respect what that word is meant to mean. And that word addiction has always medically applied to something that has a withdrawal function, that has a pressure from within your body in order to repeat that action. And we don't see that with so-called process addictions. We don't see that with things like, quote, sex addiction. And if we start really peeling back the layers and the labels around the idea of sex addiction, we see really quickly that there are much more healthful, much more reliably researched, and much more like functional terminologies that we should be leaning into.
Okay, what terminology are you referring to? Instead of a sex, calling it a sex addiction, what would be a better term?
I mean, it depends on what it is that we're actually talking about. If somebody is having sex or participating in sexuality, whether we're talking about pornography use or getting into trouble in an affair or, just making some other mistake, making a bad decision based on their sexual impulses or on their sexual desires, we need to look at that on a case-by-case basis. And if somebody is doing so repeatedly and over and in a way that's causing meaningful distress in their life, sometimes we'll use terms like hypersexuality. Even that, I think, can be like demonizing and unhelpful in a lot of ways. I honestly myself work from Douglas Baum Harvey's model of out of control sexual behavior, because I think that notion of feeling out of control is a really great way of validating and honoring the feelings and the experiences of people who are in that position, while also recognizing that you can feel out of control without having a withdrawal symptom, without being addicted, without being brainwashed, and without being forced to take any sort of specific.
Yep.
So there's some kind of stigma that's attached to the word addiction, and is basically what you're saying. I wasn't too aware of it. I didn't even look at it in that manner. Yeah.
So we're, I'm going to add on to what Christy's saying once we get Christy to come back here. But yes, there is definitely a stigma that comes around the word addiction. And you'll find that more and more people are talking about this as a real problem, because the word addiction gets thrown out very willy-nilly to a lot of things that aren't as serious as what people who do, suffer from that should be. So, that's why we want to be very particular when we talk about sex addiction and what we mean by it in a clinical sense, because what the casual general populace says about it is going to be very different from what clinicians have to say. Like Christy, I think we got you.
Yeah, I mean, the stigma is a piece of it, but I also just want to be mindful that that's not what that word has traditionally meant. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that people want to use it that way, but when they do so, they create meaningful problems for people who have serious issues that they want to have addressed.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that makes complete sense. regiment, that is pretty excessive or something of that nature. Just what would be the proper language to use, to try to get to use it, kind of put out the term.
I mean,
so you don't use it for an addiction.
I don't know what Christy would say, but you can say someone's sexually deprived and not call that an addiction, right? Like, I guess it depends on what you mean, what you're trying to describe, right?
Yeah, I mean, we can say that somebody is depressed and playing too many video games. We can say that somebody is irresponsible and spending too much money on golf clubs. We can say that somebody is irrational and spending like way too much time doomsday prepping. Like, we want to look at these things on an individual basis and not just label somebody who does something in a way that's unhealthy or in a way that we feel like is too much or just in a way that we don't like or in a way that we want to be judgy about as addiction.
Yep.
Yeah, makes sense. Definitely makes sense.
There you go.
Yeah, I never connected the stigma to the word. I am one of those people that just kind of throw the word around, without reference. But yeah, definitely great information.
And you know what, Dale? I was too, and I think most of us were. And I don't know, Christy's entire life story, but I'm sure Christy has probably used that word pretty casually before too, right? I think a lot of us have. And I think it's a new social understanding that a lot of us are coming to, that we're all trying to figure out. I'm surrounded by people like Christy every day, so like I'm thinking about this stuff all the time. But it's good that we are bringing this more to light for more people to understand, the broader public to understand. Andrew might say we're pushing an agenda, right? But it is. I mean, we want. People
it's why I appreciate people being here or watching, secular sexuality, even if you're in a long-term monogamous relationship that's sexually satisfying. Like,
right.
I appreciate that you're here to absorb these ideas from experts. And I'm not an expert in much. I just happen to have read a lot of books on this specific topic. And I appreciate people being willing to take that information in and hopefully try and build a better world with it.
That's right. So Dale, I appreciate you calling in.
Because we all
and thanks so much, Dale, for calling in. That was a good call. I like that.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah, it was like, I'm wondering about this thing. And you're like, oh, here's why we say this. And he was like, okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of thing.
If it only worked that way.
Yeah. But we have got to get to a promo here. So if you want to know what it's like on secular sexuality and some of our other shows, you should check this out.
It's just about how to be a person and how to be happy being it. I really, really love that answer.
That was a great answer. And I'd also like to point out that mental masturbation is the second best kind of masturbation.
I'm just going to go ahead and come clean right now. I have a toast fetish. I just love going around putting my face on people's toast and then just running away.
I don't want to be the one guy that came on here and had a really hot take about aliens and NASA and then just peace out, because that's weird. I think
You want to
there's
have
like
sex with aliens? If you really care about freedom and liberty and children not getting harmed and free speech, and you care about these things, well, then drink your piss. Everyone, drink your piss.
If you hit it, you get more time.
The Holy Spirit says we're not going to play that kind of game with you.
Okay, well, you tell the Holy Spirit he can go f*** himself.
like the miracle stuff. You still doing that these days? You still because like, are you keeping the social distancing? Like that's what I really want to know. Is that
you tell me, Dan?
Oh shit. Okay. This was the first time I hadn't watched the promo before. Usually we get to watch it a little bit before we goes live, so we're all cool with it. I didn't get to watch it this week. That was so fucking funny. I didn't realize they're gonna use that clip of the nonprofit something. Oh, okay. Well,
I was so thankful just to see that clip of JC, because I usually listen to the podcast version of your show, and I missed out on the magic. So I'm really glad that we got that out there.
You mean the miracle, Chris?
The miracle, right? My bad.
All right, very different things. What Matt was doing, that was magic. Okay, but
right, got it.
Yeah. Anyway, fun stuff. Definitely check out some of the other programs. They're all really, really cool. And hey,
is that your subjective opinion or is that journalism?
You know what? That's my agenda,
right,
Christy. That's my agenda. But I'm never gonna get over that. This is really funny. We have a lot of other people who want to talk to us about different things. I'm so excited about everybody. I want to try to get to everybody tonight. So let's see if we could do that. Next, we're going to talk to Cameron, who's also calling in from Washington. Cameron, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, how you doing?
Doing good. What's up?
I have actually, because you mentioned you already mentioned hypersexuality, so I was thinking of lots of questions now. I have to mention I have struggled personally with hypersexuality.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a horse in the race.
Sure, I hear that.
So I'm very curious. How would you define withdrawal symptoms versus like potential hangover? Like, how would you define withdrawal specifically?
I mean, I'm really not qualified to say because I'm not much of an addiction expert. I don't do a lot of work around the subject of addiction. I just know that the absence of something is different from something existing. And when we talk about some of the things that I cover in my field, which is, helping people with their romantic and sexual relationships and helping people to like study and understand their gender, I work with those types of folks, and I know that they are not experiencing withdrawal symptoms. I mean, I can tell you a little bit more broadly that, when somebody does have a substance abuse issue, that, their body is going to have certain needs for that chemical in order to reach homeostasis. And that can cause a lot of like physical discomfort as well as like meaningful medical issues. But that's a process that I'm honestly not particularly qualified to be super familiar with.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, you don't need sex to maintain homeostasis. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's like the big difference.
Okay, so it wouldn't be like you're not considering like the emotional after effects of like regret and I was like a different person. I would never do those things ordinarily. Like that wouldn't.
I mean, I'm deeply concerned with them in the sense that I work with people to try and help them grow and change and make their lives better. So that's my meat and potatoes. That's my everything. But I recognize that those things are not chemical withdrawal symptoms and shouldn't be understood in the same way. That's not to say that your emotions don't have chemical aspects. And yeah, we can like get into the nuts and bolts of how psychology works, but to confuse heartbreak, to confuse guilt, to confuse like shame and these different emotions with the experience of, craving heroin or having like heart palpitations because you haven't had anything to drink today is to really do a disservice both to people who are struggling with heartbreak and people who are struggling with addiction.
I think
it's just a bad metaphor ultimately. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, Cameron, but I think that's really what the case that I mean to make here is that we might compare the two. And I mean, as a therapist, I love me a good metaphor. I mean, I will spend all day comparing something to something else, but this particular metaphor has been wrapped up in a bunch of pseudoscience and it's not very apt.
Okay. And I also wanted to ask you about that too. So is your main issue with the word addiction then?
My main issue is with the word addiction in only the vaguest sense. Like I'm not trying to go for the headline here. Like underneath all of this is a really important distinction in the way that we might treat so-called sex addiction. If we recognize somebody as having out of control sexual behavior, we're going to operate very differently than if we think that somebody has a medical pathology with a withdrawal component. Not only that, but we're socially going to be discussing it in very, very different types of terms. And frankly, we're not going to be putting people in these like very for-profit kind of manipulative pseudoscience-y treatment centers that are honestly the only reason that you and I are even having this discussion right now, Cameron, because if it wasn't for the like propaganda and the political lobbying that these multinational corporations are doing in order to create profit generating centers where they quote unquote treat a imaginary ailment, then you and I wouldn't even be having this debate because the word addiction wouldn't have entered your vocabulary in the way that it has. And I know that that's a big claim. I don't mean to come across as a crazy conspiracy theorist. You can learn more about these ideas by, I referenced Nicholas Baum-Harvey. I also want to mention Dr. David Ley. There are good experts who have studied, examined, and published good research on these topics.
Well, I wonder if you know, quote unquote, sex addiction treatment could look like something more benevolent if we kind of re-examined our attitudes towards sex.
No question. I mean, I work with people. I have clients come to me all the time and say, I am here because I'm addicted to sex. And it doesn't fall to me to correct them and be like, no. I'm going to take that word away from you. That's not the right word for you. I'm going to meet them where they're at. You know, I'll be upfront about my understanding of the science and my particular expertise. And I'm not going to pretend with them that we're going to work from a model that I know to be flawed, but I'm going to have a conversation with them about what's going on in their life. Why do you think you're a sex addict? What's going on? Do you think that you're a sex addict because your partner or your parents or your culture or your society, your religion is shaming you? Or do you think that you're a sex addict because you're having sex in ways that is making your life miserable? Is it a mixture of both? What can we do about either? I mean, there are useful questions that need to be asked here, but none of those questions have anything to do with withdrawal or with the medical components of your body or the parts of your brain that light up when you look at porn. I'm so tired of people taking fMRIs and these different things and extrapolating out from such bad research and creating this entire pseudoscience to just muddy the water when there are real people having real problems that could be getting real help and instead are spending their life savings on these treatment centers that are peddling bullshit.
Yeah, it definitely seems like they're profiting off of shame and shame culture.
No question. I mean, I guess as our friend Andrew said, we could call that a religion because they're worshiping profit. Like it's problematic and it's a real issue that we're frankly just not very equipped to deal with. You know, the way that we finance medicine in this country, the way that our lobbyists operate when it comes to regulating things in this country. I mean, America can't even get a ban on conversion therapy. So people can still sell that as a product in a lot of parts of this nation. It's going to be a long time before we have a meaningful discussion about something like the bullshit pseudoscience behind so-called sex addiction treatment.
I want to go back to hypersexuality, though. Are you familiar with that and like the ways that manifests in different disorders?
Yeah, I mean that term hypersexuality, I like to demystify it and perhaps oversimplify it according to some people. To me, hypersexuality is literally any form of sexuality that is causing distress. That's all I care about. I don't care if you have sex 10 times a day or 10 times a year. If you are having sex in ways that feels problematic or that is causing distress in your life, then I might refer to that sex as hypersexual.
Okay. From what I've come across with people that I know and then the issues that I've experienced myself, there is an element of impulse control within disorders that have that as a feature.
Mm-hmm. Yes, lots of people have struggles with impulse control in lots of different ways and lots of different fields. I mean, impulse control is not unique to any particular like pathology. It's something that we all struggle with in one form or fashion. And again, if you have particularly poor impulse control or particularly poor impulse control around one part of your life, you could probably use some help. You could probably use some assistance in that area. And that help is not going to come in the form of pretending that you have some like medicalized withdrawal symptom from lack of access to sex.
Yep. Doing a thing and liking that thing and wanting to do more of that thing because you like it is not an addiction, right? I think that's kind of a good line to draw in the sand. I mean, like, again, it goes back to this conversation of just using that word. And to be fair as well, right? You can quote what that word addiction means, and what that means in 2022 is going to be maybe different in 2030 or different in 2040, because it's a developing thing too. There's still things that we're trying to that people smarter than me are spending their lives researching and figure out how to qualify it in more definite terms. But it is important to make distinctions when possible.
Yeah, and when I make the claim that sex addiction isn't real or that it's a myth or something like that, I'm operating from an understanding that the word addiction has a specific meaning. And that's true regardless of what we're discussing. But I'm going to acknowledge here that the definition of the word addiction that I'm using may not be everybody's definition. What I'm suggesting is that we have a conversation as a society about how we use that word and why, and that we make some better choices than perhaps we have been culturally.
Yeah, it's probably not a very helpful term, especially with what it's been used to refer to with like chemical addictions like drugs. But there is one more thing that I want to talk about, and that's specifically
real quick, Cameron, and that's all we got time for.
Okay, sorry. Specifically to do with manic episodes, because that is a chemical thing. That is something that I personally struggle with, and you do feel like you become a different person with that when that happens. And the euphoria and all of the chemicals that are influencing your brain, I think that can be addictive, and that can't be solved through something like talk therapy. That's a drug issue. That's your brain is overwhelmed with essentially it is a drug effect.
Yeah. I hear that, and I certainly recognize that sensation of feeling out of control, how powerful that can be in somebody's life, the distress that it can cause. I was in a marriage where manic episodes were an incredibly profound source of distress in our lives, and I never want to diminish all of those things while pointing out that your use of the phrase, it's a drug issue, I mean, it's technically correct if we want to refer to a neurotransmitter as a drug, but it's not a addictive substance. And it's actually not the case that you can become addicted or have a withdrawal component or like have that lack of homeostasis for your self-developed chemical neurotransmitters. Again, I'm a clinician, and I want to acknowledge all of that. Like, I am not a biologist or a research scientist or this sort of person, but I can tell you that using an addiction model to try and understand a mood disorder harms people who have addiction, and it harms people who have a mood disorder, both of whom need our help and support, not our like casual and lazy misunderstanding, which is frankly what we see a lot of when we're writing policy and when we are setting laws.
I see. That really was my main question. If it could ever be helpful to people like that, and I think that's been answered.
There we go.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad you're raising these questions. Thank you so much for calling us tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Cameron. Thanks so much. And it's good that we're talking about this, because I'll be honest, I'm more surprised than anything that more people are calling about this. I guess there are some issues in my mind that I just consider settled. And then I think like, oh, well, of course, other people don't always think the same way. And then I have to think about the history of my life and how recent of a development it is. And just the people I'm exposed to and the stuff that I see. It's like, yeah, this word addiction is like really not a settled thing for a lot of people. Some people think it's these different things. And we have to look to the science. and see what we can say about it, and important to develop those models that you're talking about and see what's accurate in describing this phenomenon so that we can give people the best help possible for their situations.
Yeah, and ultimately, if we want to boil my entire presentation down to the idea that I'm just like policing people's grammar and like their usage of the word addiction, then I guess fine, we can do that. I just want to present the notion that there's a good goddamn reason why I'm making that case.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we got more people that want to talk to us, so I think we should keep talking to those people. Next up, we've got Phil, who's calling in from Texas. Phil, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, Dan. Hey, Christy. Enjoying the show. Listen, I'll be really brief. I just wanted to throw a little extra light on what Andrew was struggling with. I kept waiting for him to reference Paul Tillich, a very well-known American philosopher and theologian. In his attempt to define religion can be kind of a slippery thing to get all under the same umbrella. It's like jazz. If you tell some people that Dixieland is jazz, they'll punch you in the nose. They'll say, no, it's not jazz. So Paul Tillich was a German-born theologian, born in 1885, fled Germany in the early 30s. He came out of school as a Lutheran cleric and was a what do you call the military chaplain? He was a chaplain in World War I, and wrote a number of books. And his all-inclusive kind of big umbrella definition of religion was, quote, ultimate concern. And I kept waiting for Andrew. I thought, oh, he's read Paul Tillich. He's going to say something about Paul Tillich. Well, he hadn't, obviously. He arrived at his definition independently because ultimate concern is nuanced and complicated. So it's just kind of the broadest possible sweep you can make to define religion. One's ultimate concern could be money, could be sex, could be God. That's basically all I had.
Well, and I think that's an interesting construct. Like somebody's ultimate concern is a interesting idea and one that we can play around with. But to conflate that with religion, and I appreciate that definition and where it's coming from and why that might have like some value in a very specific philosophical conversation, but to just sort of casually throw that definition around when that's not what we're really talking about when we use the word religion, it feels like it is just missing the point. I do appreciate your clarification there, though, Phil.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. I was trying to think of where I heard Paul Tillich before, and the theologian. I remember reading about him when trying to deconstruct, and he was one of those names that popped up. What I want to add to this conversation is when I was a Christian, Christy, you probably heard this too. There was this phrase that went around that said, everybody is a slave to something. Did you ever hear that?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
All the time, right? What is the point of that saying? What that saying is, you can serve, from a Christian perspective, they're trying to say, well, you can either serve God or you can serve the world or serve the devil or serve
you're serving somebody. Right? We've already decided that.
You've already decided. What it's an equivocation, right? It's an equivocation. It's trying to even the playing field between the religious and the non-religious. It's trying to make them say, well, they aren't better than you because they worship something too. And I got the sense that that's what Andrew was trying to talk to us about before, which is why I could be a bit impatient with a call like that. To explore a historical or philosophical definition of what religion could be, that's one thing, right? It's another thing to say, well, you guys are just as bad, just as guilty as the things that you guys talk about every single week. That I think was what was more going on, right? It was more sort of a criticism. And to that, I have to say, look, we're people too. We have conversations. I mean, we exist and have opinions because we're temporal beings who live in the world, and so we think thoughts. I'm okay with that. Yeah. And I think thinking thoughts and having priorities doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a church-going Christian in that same way. It doesn't mean I'm religious in that sense, but maybe he has a different opinion.
That's why I called. Because Andrew totally misrepresented and bastardized Paul Tillich's ultimate concern. It's a lot more nuanced and complicated than that.
Sure.
The guy was a brilliant theologian and philosopher, and he really misstated the point. But that's all I had. I just wanted to point and send somebody back to Paul Tillich, because he's still widely studied and widely read. He was a fascinating theologian and contributed ideas that are still used widely in seminaries today.
Well, thank you. My reading list.
Yeah, thanks
so
for
much.
The tip. Appreciate that. Short and sweet. I like it. And yeah, it's a great point, right? And ultimately, any definition we come to of religion, just to point this out, is going to be made by humans. So it is subjective. I mean, if you want to go that deep with the whole subjective thing, listen, I've read too much postmodern philosophy, okay, to have somebody call in and tell me that everything I'm saying is subjective, like I don't already know that.
Right.
Okay?
Seriously.
Like, come on. But anyway, we got some more people who want to talk to us. This is kind of related to the call previous to this one. This is Jim calling in from Canada. Jim, what's going on?
Not much. I'm calling in. I'm a recent atheist, and I was a very, very, very serious fundamentalist Christian. Part of my deconstruction was part of my sexuality. At one point in my life, I had actually convinced myself to stop masturbating and stop being involved in, those evil activities. And when I saw the poll tonight, was sex addiction real? I know addiction is real. I've lost friends to addictions. I've lost friends to alcohol, and I've lost friends to drugs.
Sorry to hear that.
But, it is tried to help those people, but, some people get on paths and you can't help them. But where I am with that is, I was more or less taught that the activities I was involved in as a theist, as a fundamentalist Christian, were wrong. And what I would like to know, I kind of made my comments to the call screeners, but, where is the line drawn? Because I've never gone into a realm where it's been a problem. And I've always had trouble with the lines blurring for me. At what point am I wrong to say, this, I have a problem now when I'm not causing.
Talk about sex specifically.
Absolutely.
Right.
How much sex is too much sex?
Yeah. Okay. Just clarifying.
Yeah, and when does it become a problem? When it's always consensual, and that's the key. When it's consensual, and there's no harm being done to anybody, and you're always taking precautions. When is it a problem?
Yeah, I mean, for something to be a problem, it has to cause an issue, right? Like, if everybody is having a good time and nobody is having any distress, then it's not a problem. If you are in a circumstance where you are having sex 5 to 10 hours a day, fantastic. Good for you that you enjoy that and that you found a way to facilitate that. But now I'm going to ask the question, are you enjoying that? Is it making your life better? Is it keeping you from earning a living? Like, is that a problem in your life? Is it keeping you from having meaningful relationships? Is that a problem in your life? Is it keeping you from finding fulfillment in other things? Like, I want you to show me the problem, and there very well may be one. Absolutely. But, there's not a number anywhere. It's just a question of where's the distress. I mean, we like to joke that a sex addict is just anybody who has more sex than the person they're talking to. But in reality, you're not struggling with an issue or a problem unless it's actually causing like damage or distress or discomfort or unhappiness in your life or, in the people around you. And that gets into like moral philosophy and ethics and maybe outside of the realm of psychology. But ultimately, if everybody is having a good time, fantastic. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, no, that was kind of my point. Because I look at everything when you were programmed as I was, as a theist, but how everything is wrong. When you start separating from church and you start enjoying your life and nobody's getting harmed and you're enjoying it, sometimes it's hard to get past those things. But everything I've done has been consensual. There hasn't been an issue. Nobody's harmed. Like, that's where I kind of struggle a bit. I have no doubt that at some point sex addiction can cause an issue in people's lives. I've got educated. I have a great job. I've done everything in life. You know, I'm moving along. You know, I'm in my 40s. But you know, when you constantly hear these things, sometimes it plays on you. But that's what I kind of what I wanted to hear. And I know, Christy, I've heard that you were actually a therapist. So is really what I wanted to hear. Like, at what point? I mean, if it's not causing harm, you know, and it's not risking people's health, you know, and I'm not.
You got it, Jim.
A day.
You got it. You figured it out, right? You like me, where you come from a tradition of Christianity that says that you have desires, and because you have desires, you are broken, and that you're a sinner, and that you need to be saved from these desires because it's not right for you to have those desires. And so that's where that guilt comes in. And that's where that, well, is it wrong that I want to have sex comes in? Like, I'm having these thoughts. And the truth is, not really. Not if you're doing it responsibly, and not if it's something you enjoy and it's not harming your life in any way, like Christy's saying. But that can't work in Christianity, because Christianity has to have some sort of control of your life. If you can have sex whenever you want, then what are you to do with this, prerogative? Like, if man has his own desires, then what is the will of God? Like it doesn't work theologically. So that's why this sex comes into it. And if you want to look into it, I mean, name me a religion that doesn't have rules on sex, right? Like you could probably count them on one hand. I mean, honestly, it's most religions do talk about it because it is such a, I don't know, it's a powerful force. That sexual desire, I guess it can be, and people want to regulate that, and religion's how people have been regulating it, and now we have, I don't know, laws in a secular society, and that's doing okay. So it is.
Well, in the last year, I've watched a lot of things, and Sam Harris said, we're this God Yahweh is obsessed with what we do when we're naked.
Sure.
Yeah. Sure.
And I think that's an important point. Like, Dan, you pointed out that, there's a very small number of religions that don't have something to say about sexuality. And I might even suggest that as a sampling error on account of the fact that the religions that are successful, the religions that stick around, the religions that become big enough for us to talk about them are the ones that insert themselves between us and a healthy natural desire.
Yeah,
it's why we, see God with so many policies on what we should eat, or on how we should dress and protect ourselves from shelter from the cold. Like, God wants to be involved in the things that we need, or humans create ideas around God being involved in the things that we need, and then those ideas get propagated again and again and again.
That's another thing too. It's interesting because food is the other thing that other religions talk mostly about. Now, we don't often think about that way because Christianity is actually the exception to the rule. Mainstream Christianity is, because we're very lax when it comes to food policy. But if you look at Islam, and if you look at even the history of Christianity itself, there are lots, and Judaism, there's lots of regulations on food, because that's the other thing society has been built on, like sex, food, and shelter. And those are the things that religion talks about. So it was a controlling force in the world. And that's why you grew up the way that you did, and I grew up the way that we did, because we're the leftovers of those traditions that are hopefully going away. But I don't know, maybe not. We'll see. Anyway, Jim, it was a great call. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for calling in. Appreciate it, and hope you have a great rest of your night. Christy, we got one more caller here. I think we should try to
sneak in one more.
Sneak in one more here.
Yeah, let's do it.
Zenith calling in from Australia. Zenith, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
G'day, people. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Doing fantastic. What's up?
Yeah, well, I was actually listening to everything you've just been going through, and that's very interesting. But I've got into me that we are not actually alive at the moment. We are
not
going to life.
Going to life? What do you mean?
Yeah. Well, basically, why is it that when you look in terms of time, you're dead for a long, long time, but you only live for a certain time? could it be that we have it the other way around?
I mean, it's an interesting model, you know, like I watched Lost all the way through to the end. But how would you know? Like, if that is the case, what evidence suggests that that's what's happening?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to put it this way. In my dreams, I see a lot of people everywhere complaining about their life. And yet they all don't yearn for death. Could it be not that they're actually deaf now and feeling nothing and going to life?
That entirely depends on whether or not you believe dreams are a reliable source of information. Do you believe that dreams are a reliable source of information?
Yes.
Well, then we might have a difference of opinion because I do not think that dreams are a reliable source of information. And my evidence for that is all the dreams I've had about shit that didn't come true or didn't matter, right? I think that's most of the time that we have dreams. The fact that you've had a couple of dreams in your life, in the vast majority of your life, where your dreams haven't mattered, and you've had some recently that maybe have, might just be, blips, extra patterns that you're seeing that may not actually be there. It might just be the human imagination playing it. Again, that's a suggestion, but every time anyone has ever said that their dreams are doing stuff, it's just something that we can't demonstrate to be true because I can't verify that you're having those dreams. And unless you're recording them in a diary, which some people do, and then they say they come things later, it's always going to be subject to human interpretation. So I would say that overall, maybe dreams aren't the best way to determine things about reality.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
There are a lot of scientists or a lot of doctors that don't believe in dying on an operation, seeing things coming back. Correct?
Like near-death experiences is what you're describing. I mean, do people believe in them? Again, like, sure, we believe that they exist, that people have experiences when they are very near death, but are those reliable? Same with your dreams. Like, it's not a reliable source of verifiable information or frankly, even valid information as we start to like pull the thread on it.
Yeah.
Well, people can say, it's not verifiable. It's not verifiable because it's never happened to them. If it's happened to them, it becomes real. If you understand what I'm trying to say.
I mean, real maybe, but not true. Not valid, not based in sound logic or fact.
Zenith, think about this. What if I said, look, I got this astrology prediction and this happened to me, and the only reason why you don't believe in astrology is because you haven't had a prediction that's come true. Like, would that convince you of the truth of astrology? I don't think it should.
Well, when you look at it, it's like saying you're looking up at the sky at night. You see the stars. Are you actually seeing stars, or are you actually seeing the light of a star that died long ago?
We're seeing the light from a star that died long ago.
Or is still alive, depending on the star, but ultimately, like, light hits our eyes, and that's the method by which we examine the world. It's not a perfect method. It's one of the better ones that we have to operate from, so we tend to use it a lot. Yeah. What does any of this have to do with your dreams or your near-death experiences being a source of verifiable information?
Yeah, the reason why I can definitively say it's light from dying stars or stars that are still alive is because physics has demonstrated that, which is a reliable, like the methodologies employed in physics are reliable methodologies by which we can make predictions, right? Can we say the same for dreams?
Yeah, but that's the point. They're predictions. No one actually knows whether they're real or they're not real. They are predictions.
We know that stars are real. I don't think it's a question in the astronomical community whether stars are real or not. Like, I don't think that's a hot topic.
No, I'm talking about life and death. If life is,
we don't know that
we know of, flesh and blood, brain, that sort of stuff, and death isn't. What's the difference?
Well,
because, I mean, if you listen to religion, Jesus says something along the lines of, your life will end now, and I will come and get you later on, downtime, and take you to life with the Father up in heaven. Correct?
Yeah. Something to that effect.
Is that death going to life, or life going to death, going to life?
Right. So I think he was speaking in metaphor, but like Christological interpretations aside, right? Like the question of what life is actually interesting, right? Because like we may not have a definitive answer as of it. In fact, we don't. And that's like something for biologists to determine and figure out, because as like we've talked about addiction changing over time and what that definition means, life has also changed as a definition, in part because we've developed new like AI technologies and also have a broader understanding of how the brain works and how other things work. So like that's an interesting philosophical question of its own, but like the fact that we can't definitively always point to what we consider life, I don't know, like that doesn't verify other models of reality being true, like whether life and death are inverse. You know what I mean? Like we still have to have reason for going down those other paths. And right now I don't see a reason why I should think one way or the other about, what you're trying to say.
Well, it's simple. I mean, that some people, or scientists or doctors, they're the same. They all think or believe that the mind is separate from the brain. But are they?
Yes. Your mind is just a construct. It's a made-up word that we use. Yeah. It doesn't mean anything except for what we say it means. Yeah. And what we understand that word to be is the synesthesia of the nerves inside of our body connecting and cross-wiring and forming something that we describe as the mind. Yep. That mind is not exclusively located in the brain, and we can demonstrate that through all kinds of really interesting research. Right. You can go back and watch the secular sexuality episode exploring the polyvagal theory, for one. Mm-hmm. But regardless, I'm struggling with how any of this has to do with the notion that we are somehow in like a loading space before our real life begins.
Yeah, and at the same time as well, we've never observed a mind without a brain, or without at least a physical correspondence, right? We've never seen like minds just exist in the abstract.
Well, a mind is just a construct, the same way that like a nation or a country is a construct. Like we can't see America, we can see the land that we've decided to describe as American.
That's true, but a nation doesn't exist without people,
right?
And a mind can't exist without like a physical apparatus, right?
Yeah, that's the thing that it's coming from. Yeah.
That's what I don't believe.
Okay. Why?
I believe the mind is separate from the brain, because the brain.
How do you know?
Is an object, correct? Because it's in your head. That's where your brain is, but your mind is not. Your mind comes to you from another place. But where?
How do you know that?
Because that comes back to where I was saying. That's coming back to dreams, and it's coming back to life, and it's coming back to death.
So your mind is doing some interesting things, and you're looking for a model to understand why. And I can absolutely appreciate that.
Sure.
Let me encourage you to perhaps investigate some neuroscience or something that has a little bit more like verifiable and like a veracity of evidence versus your personal experiences, because as profound as those might be to you, they're very subject to tampering. They're very subject to outside forces that you yourself would not want to be influenced by. And so let me acknowledge that it makes sense that you want to organize your world, and that this model that you've come to seems to fit in with your experiences. But your experiences are such a poor data set to work from. And I would really invite you to investigate a little further.
And I want to ask you this too, Seth. I'm going to ask you, before you go on, I'm going to ask you two questions. Okay. Question one, is it true that you can take certain drugs that can affect the way you have dreams?
Yes.
Okay. So would that not lead you to believe, or would it not make sense that the mind is rooted in physical causes, because a physical object is manipulating your mind and your perception.
Yes, I can agree with that one.
Okay. So why say that they're separate? Because if we have evidence that shows that one thing can cause the other, and as far as I know, no evidence that suggests the other way around, why come to that other conclusion?
Simply because I've seen, look, I'm nearly 70 years of age.
Sure.
I've seen a lot of things over my time on this world. I've spoken to a lot of people. I've spoken to a lot of neuroscientists, neurosurgeons, and I've spoken to a lot of people who are this sort of thing. Okay, I'll give you an example the other way with that. That's like saying, some people have said, they don't eat meat because they don't want to harm animals. And yet, it's been proved through scientific methods, or whichever way you want to put that plants also feel pain.
I'm going to say that's not true. I think that's a myth. And I'm saying that because I'm literally a vegan, and that's a thing that gets perpetuated around people who do eat meat. That perceptions of pain amongst plants is a thing, and that's debatable. But even if it did exist, definitely doesn't exist amongst all plant species. But that's just
definition of pain is, getting really stretched, right. And that's a valid and important conversation, but it doesn't make Zenith's point.
Also, that's just saying that people are hypocrites. That I don't think that metaphor has to deal with my point, which is that your brain or your dreams have physical influences. And if it has physical influences, then it must be interacting with the physical, at least on some level, right? Like you can't get around that.
Well, I'll give you an example on that one too. Then, years ago, we used to have tapes that you put in a cassette. Maybe that's beyond before your time.
Familiar with the concept of cassette tapes? Help me out here, and we're a little bit past time, so we please wrap it up. Help me.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what that simply means is you listen to the tape at night while you sleep to help you pass tests in school. And when you wake up in the morning, you can remember and do everything that tape says.
That's not a thing.
We start off this show talking about hypnosis. I'm fascinated by it. I'm a proponent of it. I'm trained in it. I love talking about hypnosis. But that tape does not exist. Are there tapes that could potentially help you become a better student? Absolutely. But there are also YouTube videos that could help you become a better student. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Also, that's only proving my point, because the physical world is influencing your brain. It's not coming from anywhere that's not physical. Like a cassette audio is a physical medium. So I don't know how it illustrates your point, but Zenith, we don't have time. I'm sorry. We got to wrap up this call. I do appreciate you calling in. And I hope you find the answers that you're looking for, but I don't think I've literally said this on the show before. I don't think dreams are a reliable source of information. I don't know. I guess I have to keep saying it. I just don't think they are, because everybody's had dreams about stuff, man. And
and I appreciate why people want to put so much importance on it. I mean, our defenses are down in a certain way that makes us really willing to take something we receive in a dream, or something that is part of our natural thought processes at a moment when our ego's not really there to defend us. We take that information a lot more seriously. And I think that that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's coming from, some other dimension.
Yeah, definitely. This is I am so surprised, Christy, that the topic of consciousness being streamed into the brain, coming from outside the brain, has come up a lot on this show. I don't know what it is. People are really fascinated by consciousness and how it works, because it is kind of weird. But it's such a popular idea.
It really is. And again, I mentioned my fascination with psychedelics in psychotherapy and the burgeoning research there. And that's such a common talking point, that these psychedelic chemicals, which do fascinating, beautiful, amazing things, are somehow like retuning us into some like sonic frequency out in the ether.
You're seeing
and
dimensions.
why? Why? There's so many like simpler explanations. You don't have to use Occam's razor to recognize that that's just preposterous.
Yeah, experiences are overwhelming, I guess, and that causes us to not think straight. I don't know, but look, we don't have any more time. We did what we could.
We did what we could.
We've got to wrap up this program. I want to give a special thanks to you, Christy, for being on the show. Normally, I ask where can people find you at, but I know exactly where people can find you at, and that's on our sister show, Secular Sexuality.
Thursday nights at 7. Check us out live. We'd love to hear your calls. If you still think that sex addiction is a thing, or you want to know if your favorite type of porn is okay, or if you want to be introduced to like your new favorite type of porn, we'd love to hear your call. Come join us on SecX.
A lot of benefits to listening to that program. And of course, this is Truth Wanted. This is a live call-in show. Happens every single week, 7 p.m. Central. So if you want to call in, come check us out live on YouTube. But you can also find this show on Spotify and wherever else you might get your podcasts. And I'm Objectively Dan. I'm hosting today. You can follow me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan. And there's a couple different ways you can support this show. One of them is through our store. Check out all the cool merch we got in that store. Look at that. T-shirts, hoodies, beanies. It's hoodie season, baby. You gotta get on it. I said beanies. That's actually a mask in that picture.
Yeah, I was going to say, y'all got face masks.
We got face masks. You don't have face masks? Yeah, you do. I think you do.
I hadn't caught it yet.
I thought you did.
We're checking out. I'll have to take a look.
Gotta get them face masks. There you can also become a patron on Patreon. So the link for that is going to be in the description. And you can also become a member on YouTube if you want. If you do that, you click that little join button. You can get little emoticons of my face, and that's still a thing. And also all the Truth Wanted logos. So very, very cool if you want to do that. Now, this show is a product of the Atheist community of Austin. We have a bunch of other different shows. You can check out a link for that as well. You can go to the AEN Podcast Network, which at tiny.cc/AEN Podcast to check out all the other shows like Secular Sexuality, amongst other fine programs. And I have to give a special thanks to the wonderful, fantastic, amazing, spectacular crew that helps make this show happen every single week. Look at those crew members. They're so cool. They're so great. I love them. They're the best. Other ways to support the show or talk to people about it is to join the Facebook group. We have a Truth Wanted fan group that you should definitely check out if you haven't already. The link for that is in the description as well. And it's also on screen if you want to look at that. And we are going to be in the after show in just a second here on the Atheist community of Discord, which is a fan-run Discord server. So if you want to keep talking to us, go over to the Discord, and we're going to be in there for next 20 minutes or so, maybe longer, we'll see. And we'll answer some of your questions and stuff we couldn't get to on this particular show. And if you want to email the show, it's truth@atheist-community.org. I read all those emails that come in. So please come email us if you haven't already. And that's all the plugs that I've got to go through. Christy, now's the time to talk about our words of wisdom. What are your words of wisdom for us today, Christy?
You know, I'm going to just tell people that your sleep is the cause of and solution to way more of your problems than you realize. If you are struggling at work, you're having trouble in your relationship, whatever else is going on, you're trying to lose weight or whatever else, look at how much you're sleeping.
Yes. And with that, I think I should get some more rest. Folks, this has been another episode of Truth Wanted. I'm Objectively Dan. Remember to always keep one the truth, and I'll see you next time.
Watch The Non-Prophets and join the hosts in the live chat, Sundays at 3 p.m. Central, between the Atheist Experience and Talk Hidden. Visit tiny.cc/YTNP.